My name is Rebecca, and at 28, I thought I knew what the happiest day of my life would look like. My wedding day started as that perfect dream until my sister Megan grabbed the microphone during the reception and announced she was pregnant with my new husband's baby. The room froze. My world collapsed. But what happened next when my 12-year-old niece Emma stood up and spoke changed everything in ways none of us could have imagined. Before I dive into how my fairy tale wedding turned into a reality show nightmare, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if family drama that makes soap operas look boring is your thing. Trust me, this story has twists you won't see coming. I met James 3 years ago at my college friend Stephanie's 4th of July barbecue. I wasn't even planning to go that day. I had a mountain of work to finish for my job as a marketing consultant, but Stephanie insisted, saying she had someone she wanted me to meet. Turns out she was right to insist. James was standing by the grill when I arrived, helping Stephanie's husband with the cooking duties. The first thing I noticed was his laugh, warm, genuine, and slightly goofy. His dark hair kept falling into his eyes as he flipped burgers, and he had this cute way of brushing it back with his wrist since his hands were occupied. When Stephanie introduced us, he wiped his hand carefully on his apron before shaking mine, and his eyes, a warm hazel, locked with mine in a way that made my heart skip. "I've heard so much about you," he said with a smile that reached all the way to those eyes. "Stephanie says you're the smartest person she knows." "Well, Stephanie exaggerates," I replied, immediately feeling comfortable with him. "But I am pretty good at Trivial Pursuit." That made him laugh, and somehow we ended up talking for the next 3 hours straight, long after the food was gone and other guests had started playing yard games. James was 30, worked as an architectural engineer, and had the kind of thoughtful nature that seems increasingly rare. He listened, really listened when I spoke. By the end of the night, when he asked for my number, I didn't hesitate for a second. Our first date was the following weekend, a picnic in the botanical gardens where he surprised me by remembering I'd mentioned loving lilies. He brought me a single stem, nothing flashy or over the top, just a simple gesture showing he'd paid attention. That was James in a nutshell, attentive without being showy, genuine without trying too hard. Over the next few months, our relationship bloomed naturally. He sent me random texts during the day when he saw something that reminded him of me. He remembered small details about my stories and asked follow-up questions weeks later. When I got sick with a terrible flu, he showed up at my apartment with homemade soup medicine and a stack of my favorite movies, then sat beside me while I dozed in and out of fever dreams. It wasn't just his treatment of me that won me over. It was how he interacted with everyone. James held doors for strangers, remembered the names of waitstaff, and always tipped generously. He called his mother every Sunday without fail and helped his elderly neighbor with yard work. These weren't things he did to impress me, they were just who he was. Meeting my family was a big step, and I was nervous. My parents, Martha and Robert, had been married for 35 years and had high standards for who their daughters dated. My older sister Megan had gone through a series of difficult relationships, ultimately becoming a single mother to my niece Emma, when her long-term boyfriend Derek abandoned them shortly after Emma was born. My parents were protective, especially after seeing what Megan had gone through, but James passed their inspection with flying colors. My dad, normally reserved with my boyfriends, was laughing with James by the end of dinner. My mom pulled me aside to whisper, "This one's different, Becca. Don't let him get away." Even Megan seemed to approve, though I noticed a tightness around her eyes when she smiled at us together. Megan and I had always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, she was the beautiful, popular one while I was the studious, quieter sister. But after Emma was born and Derek left, our dynamic shifted. Suddenly, I was the one with the freedom and opportunities while she struggled with single motherhood. I tried to help where I could, babysitting Emma often and supporting Megan emotionally, but there was always an underlying current of competition that neither of us fully acknowledged. James and I dated for 2 years before he proposed. He took me back to Stephanie's house, to the exact spot where we'd met, and got down on one knee with a vintage-style ring that perfectly matched my taste. Of course I said yes through happy tears, and the planning began almost immediately. My mother threw herself into wedding preparations with gusto. Megan agreed to be my maid of honor, though her enthusiasm seemed measured compared to my mother's. I chalked it up to her being busy with Emma and her job as a dental hygienist. The planning months were mostly joyful, with only a few small tensions. Megan missed several dress fittings and seemed distracted during others. At my bridal shower, she disappeared for nearly an hour, returning with red-rimmed eyes she blamed on seasonal allergies. When I asked if everything was okay, she insisted she was just tired from working extra shifts. 2 weeks before the wedding, Megan mentioned that Derek had been in touch wanting to reconnect with Emma after years of minimal contact. She seemed conflicted about it, and I advised caution, remembering how devastated both she and Emma had been each time Derek had previously drifted back only to disappear again. Megan grew defensive, saying I couldn't possibly understand her situation. We had our first real argument in years, but made up the next day, when she called to apologize, blaming wedding stress and her own complicated feelings about seeing me getting my happily ever after. The morning of my wedding dawned clear and perfect. A beautiful June day with blue skies and just enough breeze to keep everyone comfortable. I woke up in my childhood bedroom surrounded by my bridesmaids and my mother feeling an overwhelming sense of joy and anticipation. Even Megan seemed to have set aside whatever had been bothering her, helping me into my dress with teary-eyed care and presenting me with a beautiful borrowed bracelet that had belonged to our grandmother. As I looked at myself in the mirror, my mother's veil arranged perfectly over my upswept hair, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. In just a few hours, I would be marrying the love of my life, surrounded by everyone who mattered to us. What could possibly go wrong? Our venue was a beautifully restored barn with gardens surrounding it, rustic but elegant, with twinkling lights strung across wooden beams and wildflowers in mason jars lining the aisle. I'd fallen in love with it the moment we toured it, imagining how magical it would look filled with our loved ones. The reality exceeded even my dreams. The morning light filtered through the windows, casting a golden glow over everything as guests began to arrive. From my preparation room, I could hear the string quartet playing softly, the gentle murmur of conversation, occasional laughter. It felt like the beginning of something wonderful. My father knocked on the door looking handsome in his gray suit, his eyes growing misty when he saw me. "You look just like your mother did," he said, his voice catching. "The most beautiful bride I've ever seen." We had a moment alone before the ceremony, him holding both my hands and telling me how proud he was of the woman I'd become, how happy he was that I'd found someone like James. It was one of those perfect father-daughter moments I knew I'd cherish forever. The bridesmaids lined up in their sage green dresses, Megan at the front as maid of honor. She'd been quiet during our preparations, but I assumed she was focused on her duties. Emma, acting as our junior bridesmaid, looked adorable in her matching dress, practically vibrating with excitement. "You look like a princess, Aunt Rebecca," she whispered, giving me a careful hug to avoid wrinkling my dress. Then it was time. The music changed, signaling the start of the procession. One by one, my bridesmaids made their way down the aisle. Megan turned to give me a last look before her entrance, and something in her expression gave me pause, a flash of something that looked almost like regret, but it was gone so quickly, I thought I must have imagined it. And then it was my turn. My father offered his arm, and together we stepped into view of our assembled guests. Everyone stood turning to watch our progress, but all I could see was James at the end of the aisle. His face when he saw me, the pure love and wonder in his expression, is something I'll never forget. In that moment, nothing else mattered. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. We had written our own vows, and James's voice trembled slightly as he promised to stand by me through whatever life brought us to be my partner and best friend until our last days. I somehow made it through my own vows despite the happy tears threatening to spill over. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant said, beaming at us. "You may kiss the bride." James cupped my face gently as if I were made of porcelain, and kissed me to the sound of applause and cheers. We turned to face our guests as a married couple, and I felt a surge of pure joy unlike anything I'd experienced before. The reception began with cocktail hour in the garden while we took photos with family and the wedding party. James and I stole a few private moments together, both of us giddy with happiness. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said, trying out my new name with a grin. "That's me," I laughed, still hardly able to believe this wonderful man was now my husband. When we entered the reception as a couple, everyone cheered. Our first dance was to "Can't Help Falling in Love" James, spinning me gently across the floor as I thanked whatever twist of fate had brought him into my life. The father-daughter dance followed both of us teary-eyed as we swayed to "What a Wonderful World." The dinner was delicious, the cake cutting sweet and traditional, no smashing cake in each other's faces despite my cousin's encouragement. Throughout it all, James never strayed far from my side, his hand finding mine under the table, his eyes meeting mine across the room if we were momentarily separated. It was during dinner that I noticed Megan seemed to be drinking more than usual. She was on her third glass of wine before the main course arrived, and there was a brittle quality to her smile that made me uneasy. I saw her in deep conversation with our cousin Rachel, their heads close together, Rachel looking concerned. When they noticed me, watching Megan quickly plastered on a smile and raised her glass in my direction. I meant to check on her, but there were so many people wanting to talk to us to offer congratulations that I kept getting pulled away. James was being the perfect groom, charming my extended family, graciously accepting well wishes. Everyone kept telling me how lucky I was, and I couldn't have agreed more. As the meal wound down and the dance floor opened up, I finally caught a moment with my mother. "Is Megan okay?" I asked quietly, watching my sister across the room. "She seems a bit off." My mother followed my gaze. "I think it's just hard for her seeing you so happy. You know how she's been struggling lately." I nodded, feeling a pang of guilt. My sister had always had it harder than me in many ways. "Maybe I should talk to her," I said. "Just enjoy your day, sweetheart," my mother advised. "Megan will be fine. This is your moment." So I pushed my concerns aside and returned to James, letting him pull me onto the dance floor for an upbeat number that had everyone joining in. The barn was filled with laughter and music, the twinkling lights creating a magical atmosphere as evening began to fall. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. The reception was in full swing when the DJ announced it was time for speeches. My father had insisted on going first, not trusting himself to speak if he had to follow anyone else. He told the story of holding me as a newborn, of teaching me to ride a bike, of watching me grow into a woman who made him proud every day. There wasn't a dry eye in the house by the time he welcomed James to our family with a warm handshake that turned into a hug. James's best man gave a funny, touching speech about their college days and how James had changed for the better since meeting me. My maid of honor, my college roommate Lily, spoke about our friendship and how she'd known James was the one from the first time she saw us together. The speeches were supposed to end there, but when the DJ asked if anyone else wanted to say a few words, Megan stood up, wobbling slightly. I felt a flicker of alarm. This hadn't been planned, and Megan had clearly had too much to drink. James squeezed my hand reassuringly under the table as my sister made her way to the microphone. "I want to say something about my little sister and her new husband," Megan said, her words slightly slurred. She paused, looking around the room, then directly at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Rebecca has always been the good one," she continued. "The smart one. The one who does everything right. And now she's got the perfect husband too." She raised her glass toward James, but there was something off in the gesture. To James. The perfect guy. So perfect. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Megan took another sip of wine, then seemed to steel herself. "Too bad he's not as perfect as everyone thinks," she said, her voice suddenly harder. My father half rose from his seat. "Megan, that's enough." But Megan ignored him. "You all think you know him, but you don't. I know him better than anyone here. Even better than Rebecca does." My stomach dropped. James's hand tightened on mine. "Megan," I said, my voice coming out as barely more than a whisper. "Please, don't do this." My sister's eyes locked with mine, and I saw something terrible there, pain and anger, and something that looked almost like triumph. "I'm pregnant," she announced, her voice ringing through the suddenly silent barn. 10 weeks pregnant. And James is the father. The world seemed to stop. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. From far away, I heard gasps, murmurs, the sound of a glass shattering. I turned to look at James and found his face drained of color, his expression one of absolute shock. "That's not possible," he said, his voice hoarse. "That's not true." But Megan wasn't finished. "It happened when Rebecca was visiting Grandma in the hospital. Remember, Becca, you were gone for 3 days. James came over to drop off some paperwork you'd forgotten." One thing led to another. She shrugged, the gesture obscenely casual given what she was claiming. My mother had her hands over her mouth. My father was on his feet now, his face flushed with anger. Emma, sitting at a table with some of my younger cousins, looked horrified. "Megan, stop it," I finally managed to say, finding my voice. "This isn't funny." "Do I look like I'm laughing?" my sister countered. I didn't want to do this today, but I couldn't stand watching everyone celebrate when I know the truth. When I'm carrying his child while he marries my sister. The room erupted in shocked conversation. I felt dizzy like I might faint. James was shaking his head vehemently. Rebecca, I swear to you this never happened. I would never. My cousin Rachel was at Megan's side, now trying to take the microphone, but Megan held on to it. I'm sorry, Becca, she said, though she didn't sound sorry at all. You deserve to know. Everyone deserved to know what kind of man you just married. James was on his feet now. This is a lie, he said loudly. I've never touched Megan. Never. This is completely insane. My brother-in-law, Tony, who had always been protective of me, moved toward James with a threatening posture. You son of a Stop, I cried, finding strength from somewhere. Everyone just stop, please. I couldn't handle this, not with 200 pairs of eyes watching this nightmare unfold. I stood up, my legs barely supporting me, and hurried out of the barn into the cool evening air. Behind me I could hear raised voices, my mother calling my name, but I kept walking until I reached the small garden cottage we'd used for pre-ceremony preparations. I sank onto a small sofa, my wedding dress billowing around me, and tried to breathe. This couldn't be happening. Not today. Not with James, who I trusted completely. But why would Megan make up something so terrible? She was my sister. She wouldn't destroy my wedding day without a reason. Would she? The door opened, and James appeared, his face ashen. Rebecca, he said, his voice breaking. Rebecca, please believe me. I never touched your sister. I would never do that to you, to us. I wanted to believe him. Everything in me wanted to believe him. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Then why would she say it? Why would she do this? I don't know, he said desperately, kneeling in front of me, taking my hands. I don't know why she would say something so horrible. But it's not true. I swear on my life, it's not true. The door burst open again, and Megan appeared, followed by my parents and Lily, who had apparently tried to stop them from barging in. Don't believe his lies, Megan said. I didn't want to do this today, but I couldn't let you start your marriage with him without knowing the truth. James didn't even look at her. He kept his eyes on mine, pleading. Rebecca, think about it. When would this have happened? I've never been alone with Megan. Never. My father stepped forward, his face thunderous. James, if what Megan is saying is true, it's not, James insisted, finally turning to face my family. I don't know why she's saying this, but it's absolutely not true. Megan crossed her arms. 10 weeks ago, when Rebecca was at the hospital with Grandma, you came over with those contract papers for the house. Emma was at a sleepover. You know I'm telling the truth. A horrible thought struck me. James, when did you take those papers to Megan? James ran a hand through his hair. I dropped them in her mailbox. I never went inside. I had that presentation in Boston the next morning, remember? I drove by her place on my way out of town, put the envelope in her mailbox, and left for the airport. I was in Boston that whole weekend. A flicker of something alarm crossed Megan's face. That's not true, she insisted. You came inside. We had a glass of wine. You were upset about work, and I was comforting you, and I was in Boston, James repeated firmly. My flight left at 8 p.m. I have the boarding pass on my email. I presented to 50 people the next morning. My mother stepped closer to Megan. Sweetheart, are you sure about this? This is a very serious accusation. Megan's face flushed. Of course, I'm sure I'm pregnant, aren't I? Do you think I'd make this up? But doubt had crept into the room. James's Boston trip had been a big deal, his first major presentation to the senior partners. We'd talked on the phone each night while he was away. There had been photos on the company website of the event. I need everyone to leave, I said suddenly. Everyone except James. I need to talk to my husband alone. My father looked like he wanted to argue, but my mother took his arm. Come on, Robert. Let's give them a minute. Megan didn't move. You're really going to believe him over me, your own sister? Megan, please, I said, feeling exhausted. Just give us a minute. After they'd all filed out, I turned to James, searching his face. Tell me the truth. I need the absolute truth. I have never been unfaithful to you, he said, his eyes never leaving mine. I have never touched your sister. I was in Boston that weekend. You can check my email for the flight confirmation. You can call the hotel. You can look at the company website where they posted photos of the presentation. Rebecca, please. You know me. You know I wouldn't do this. And I did know him. Despite the horrible doubt Megan had planted, despite the shock and confusion of the moment, I knew James. 3 years of watching him interact with the world, of seeing his integrity in action, of loving him and being loved by him, that couldn't be fake. I believe you, I said finally. But we need to figure out why Megan would say this. And we need to deal with 200 guests who just witnessed the most dramatic moment of our lives. James let out a long, shaky breath and pulled me into his arms. We'll figure it out together, he said. Like we always do. We had barely gathered ourselves when the door opened again and Lily poked her head in. I hate to interrupt, she said apologetically, but people are starting to leave and there's kind of a civil war brewing out there. Some people are taking Megan's side, some are defending James, and your dad looks like he might punch someone. What do you want me to do? I sighed, resting my forehead briefly against James's chest before straightening up. Tell them we'll be out in a minute. After Lily left, James took my hands. What do you want to do? I want to go back in time and redo this whole day, I said bitterly. Then I shook my head. But since that's not possible, I think we need to face this head on. I believe you, James. I know you wouldn't lie to me, so let's go out there together and figure out what's really going on. He kissed my forehead gently. I love you so much. Whatever happens, remember that. Hand in hand, we walked back to the reception. The atmosphere had completely changed. Instead of celebration, the air was thick with tension. Guests stood in clusters, obviously discussing the drama. Some fell silent as we entered, watching us with expressions ranging from sympathy to judgment. My parents were with Megan near the head table. Emma sat alone at a table in the corner, looking miserable. My heart broke for her. She shouldn't have to witness this adult mess. I headed straight for my sister James by my side. Megan, we need to talk. She looked up, her makeup smeared from crying, though her eyes were hard. There's nothing to talk about. I told the truth. James was in Boston that weekend, I said quietly. You know he was. We all knew he was. Megan's expression faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. It was before that then. 8 weeks ago. I'm getting the timeline confused. James shook his head. That doesn't work either. 8 weeks ago was Rebecca's birthday weekend. We were in Chicago with her college friends. There are dozens of photos. Megan's face flushed darker. You're trying to confuse me. I know what happened. My mother put a gentle hand on Megan's shoulder. Sweetheart, if you're pregnant, we'll support you. But are you sure about James being involved? Could it be someone else? Like who Megan snapped? I'm not sleeping around if that's what you're implying. From across the room, my cousin Stephanie approached tentatively. Megan, she said carefully, didn't you tell me last month that Derek was back in town, that you two had been talking again? Megan whirled on her. Shut up, Steph, that has nothing to do with this. But the seed had been planted. My father, who had been watching silently with a stormy expression, finally spoke. Megan, is this baby Derek's? No, Megan insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. It's James's baby. He's trying to weasel out of responsibility, like all men do. I have never touched your sister, James said, his voice steady despite the situation. Never. And I think you know that. As the confrontation escalated, I became aware of Emma watching us, her young face troubled. She slipped out of her seat and approached us hesitantly. Mom, she said quietly, tugging at Megan's dress. Mom, can we go home now, please? Megan turned to her daughter, her expression softening slightly. Not now, Emma. The adults are talking. But Mom. I said not now, Megan snapped, causing Emma to flinch back. My heart ached for my niece. Emma, honey, why don't you go with Aunt Lily for a bit? She can take you to get some cake. Emma looked at me with eyes too wise for her 12 years. I'm sorry about your wedding, Aunt Rebecca, she whispered. As Lily led Emma away, Megan seemed to deflate slightly. I didn't want to do this today, she said, though it sounded rehearsed. I just couldn't watch everyone celebrating when I know the truth. The truth, James said quietly, is that I have never been unfaithful to Rebecca. The truth is that I was never alone with you. The truth is that you're making this up, and I think we all need to know why. My cousin Rachel, who had been standing nearby, spoke up. Megan, remember when we talked last week, you said Derek was pressuring you to get back together. You said he was different now. Megan shot Rachel a betrayed look. That has nothing to do with this. But the pieces were starting to come together. Derek, Emma's father, had a pattern of appearing and disappearing from their lives. Each time he would swear he had changed, and each time he would eventually leave again, breaking both Megan's and Emma's hearts. "Megan," I said gently, "if you're pregnant with Derek's baby, we'll support you. You know that. You don't need to create this situation." "It's not Derek's baby," she insisted, but her voice cracked. "It's James's. I'm telling the truth." My father, who had been watching the exchange, carefully stepped forward. "I think that's enough for tonight. Megan, I'm taking you home. This isn't the time or place for this discussion." Megan looked around at the remaining guests, many of whom were watching the drama unfold with uncomfortable fascination. Some of James's family members stood protectively near him, casting suspicious glances at my sister. The beautiful wedding I had dreamed of had devolved into something ugly and painful. "Fine," Megan said finally. "Take me home. But this isn't over." As my father led Megan away, my mother approached James and me, her face drawn with distress. "I'm so sorry," she said, hugging me tightly. "I don't know what's gotten into her. This isn't like Megan." But wasn't it? The more I thought about it, the more I could see the pattern. Megan had always competed with me, always resented my accomplishments and happiness. But this was beyond competition, this was destruction. "What should we do?" I asked, looking around at the ruins of our reception. "Half the guests have left. The others are just witnessing our family fall apart." James squeezed my hand. "It's your call. We can end the night now, or we can try to salvage something from it." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I think we should," but before I could finish my thought, Emma came running back into the room, her face flushed with urgency. "Aunt Rebecca, Uncle James. Wait, I need to tell you something." "Emma, honey, what is it?" I asked, concerned by the desperate look on my niece's face. Emma glanced nervously toward the exit, where her mother had just left with my father. "It's about Mom," she said, her voice small but determined. "She's lying. Uncle James never came to our house that weekend. I wasn't at a sleepover. I was home with the flu, remember? You brought me soup and those popsicles I like." I stared at her, the memory clicking into place. Emma had been sick the weekend I visited my grandmother in the hospital. I had indeed brought her soup and popsicles before leaving town. James looked confused. "I never went inside your house, Emma. I just left some papers in the mailbox." "I know," Emma said. "I saw you from the window. You waved at me, but you didn't come in. Mom was at work until late that night." A murmur went through the remaining guests. My mother put a hand to her mouth. "But if James wasn't there," she began. "Derek was," Emma said, her young face troubled. "He came over the next night. Mom thought I was asleep, but I heard them arguing. And then, not arguing anymore." She blushed slightly, clearly uncomfortable. I knelt down to Emma's level despite my wedding dress. "Emma, are you sure about this? This is very important." Emma nodded solemnly. "I'm sure. Mom's been seeing Derek again for a couple months. She made me promise not to tell you, or Grandma and Grandpa. She said you wouldn't understand." I exchanged a look with James, whose expression had shifted from hurt and confusion to something like pity. "Where's your dad now?" James asked gently. Emma's face fell. "He left again. Last week. They had a big fight. Mom was crying a lot, and then she started talking about you guys and the wedding. I heard her on the phone with someone saying she couldn't take it anymore, and why should Rebecca get everything when I'm left with nothing again?" My heart sank. The pieces were falling into place. Megan's bizarre accusation wasn't just a random act of cruelty. It was calculated, born from a toxic mix of jealousy, desperation, and heartbreak. My mother looked devastated. "I should go after them," she said. "Robert doesn't know any of this." "I'll go," Lily offered. "You should stay here with Rebecca and James." She hurried out, presumably to catch my father and sister before they left. The remaining guests were watching this scene unfold with varying degrees of discomfort and fascination. My new mother-in-law approached, placing a supportive hand on James's arm. "Perhaps we should ask the band to start playing again," she suggested gently. "Give everyone something to focus on besides." She gestured vaguely at the drama. I nodded gratefully. "That's a good idea. Thank you." As the band tentatively struck up a slow song, I turned back to Emma, who was looking increasingly distressed. "Am I in trouble?" she asked in a small voice. "Mom's going to be so mad at me." I pulled her into a careful hug. "No, sweetie. You're not in trouble at all. You told the truth, and that was very brave." James knelt beside us. You did the right thing, Emma. Sometimes the truth is hard, but it's always better than a lie. Emma looked at him with worried eyes. Mom's really sad about Derek leaving again. And she's scared about the baby. I think that's why she said those things about you. The maturity and insight of this 12-year-old girl struck me deeply. Despite being caught in an impossible situation, Emma had found the courage to stand up for the truth. Your mom is going through a tough time, James said carefully. But that doesn't make what she did okay. We'll help her, but right now, let's make sure you're okay. My mother put an arm around Emma's shoulders. Why don't you and I get some cake and sit down? You must be exhausted. As they walked away, James and I were left facing the awkward task of salvaging what remained of our wedding reception. About half the guests had departed during the drama, but those who remained, mostly close friends and family, seemed determined to help us reclaim some joy from the evening. Stephanie approached us, champagne glasses in hand. I think you two could use these, she said, passing them to us. And for what it's worth, not a single person in this room believed Megan's story. Not even for a second. James gave her a grateful smile. Thanks, Steph. My college friends surrounded us, forming a protective circle of support. James's brother started telling loud, funny stories about their childhood, creating a pocket of normalcy in the midst of chaos. Slowly, the atmosphere in the room began to shift back toward celebration, though a shadow still lingered. We went through the motions of wedding traditions, cutting the cake, though the photographer had long since departed, sharing a dance, though the energy was subdued. I kept glancing toward the door, wondering what was happening with Megan, my father, and Lily. Part of me wanted to rush after them to confront my sister and demand answers. But another part, the newly minted wife part, wanted to salvage whatever I could of this day with James. We don't have to stay, James murmured as we swayed to the music. We can leave whenever you want. I rested my head against his chest, drawing comfort from his solid presence. I don't want to let her ruin everything I said. She's already taken so much from this day. Nothing could ruin today for me, he replied, his arms tightening around me. I still got to marry you. That's all that matters. His unwavering steadiness brought tears to my eyes. Despite everything, I had married a good man, a man who had just been falsely accused of a terrible betrayal in front of everyone we knew, yet who was still focused on my feelings on us. Just as the dance ended, Lily returned, her expression troubled. She pulled me aside while James went to speak with his parents. Your dad took Megan home, she reported. I caught up with them in the parking lot and told your dad what Emma said. Megan completely lost it, screaming, crying, saying everyone was against her. Did she admit she was lying, I asked. Lily hesitated. Not in so many words. But she didn't deny it either. She kept saying things like, you don't understand, and I can't do this alone again. Your dad looked. I've never seen him so angry and so sad at the same time. He said he'd handle it, and that you should try to enjoy what's left of your wedding. I closed my eyes, briefly imagining the scene. Poor Emma. She shouldn't have to deal with this. Your mom said Emma can stay with them tonight, Lily assured me. She's okay. She's actually in the kitchen right now, helping the staff pack up leftover cake for guests to take home. Despite everything that made me smile a little, Emma had always been a helper, finding practical ways to make things better, even in difficult situations. As the night wound down, I found myself exhausted but oddly calm. The initial shock and horror had faded, replaced by a deep sadness for my sister and niece, and gratitude for James and those who had stood by us. Our grand exit, once planned as a sparkler-lit walk through lines of cheering guests, became a quiet departure with just our closest friends and family remaining to see us off. As we prepared to leave, Emma ran up to give us both tight hugs. I'm really sorry, she whispered again. I knelt down once more despite my dress. Emma, listen to me. You have nothing to be sorry for. You were incredibly brave tonight. Will Mom be okay? She asked. Her young face creased with worry that no child should have to bear. James rested a gentle hand on her shoulder. Your mom is going through a tough time, but she'll be okay. And so will you. We'll all make sure of that. As we finally left our wedding reception, so different from what we had planned, yet somehow more meaningful for the trial we had weathered together, I held tight to James's hand. Whatever came next, whatever fallout we would face from Megan's actions, we would face it together. Some wedding day, huh? James said softly as we drove away. Not exactly the fairy tale I imagined, I admitted. But maybe a better story in the end. A real one. He lifted my hand to his lips. The beginning of our story. Not the end. Despite everything, I felt a surge of love for this man who had stood steady through the storm. The day had been marred by drama and pain, but the marriage I believed would be stronger for having faced this first challenge together. The morning after our wedding, James and I sat in our hotel room, exhausted and emotionally drained. We had barely slept, spending most of the night talking through what had happened and what it meant for our future, particularly our relationship with my family. "I should call my parents," I said, staring at my phone. "Check on Emma at least." James nodded, rubbing my shoulder supportively. "Do you want some privacy?" "No," I said, quickly catching his hand. "We're in this together. No more secrets or private family matters. What affects me affects you now." I put the phone on speaker as I called my mother. She answered on the second ring, her voice hushed. "Rebecca, how are you holding up?" "About as well as can be expected," I replied. "How's Emma? Is she okay?" My mother sighed. "She's fine, physically at least. She's watching TV with your father right now. She's worried about Megan, of course, and feeling guilty for speaking up." "She has nothing to feel guilty about," James said firmly. "She told the truth." I know, my mother agreed. "We've been telling her the same thing. Rebecca, about Megan." I tensed. "What about her?" "She's admitted it was a lie," my mother said quietly. "Not directly to us, but we overheard her on the phone with someone, probably that friend of hers, Jenna. She was crying, saying she'd ruined everything and told a horrible lie that she couldn't take back." Despite already believing Megan had lied, hearing this confirmation sent a wave of complex emotions through me. Relief that James was vindicated, fury that my sister had done this deliberately, heartbreak that our relationship might be irreparably damaged. "Has she said anything to you?" I asked. "She hasn't come out of the guest room since your father brought her home last night," my mother replied. "He tried to talk to her, but she just screamed at him to leave her alone." "Rebecca, I think she's in a very bad place mentally. I'm worried about her." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility despite being the wronged party in this situation. "It's not an excuse for what she did." "Of course not," my mother said quickly. "Nothing excuses that. But if what Emma said is true, if Derek is the father and he's abandoned her again," the scenario was all too familiar. Derek had left Megan when she was pregnant, with Emma coming back into their lives briefly every few years, only to disappear again when responsibility became too much. The pattern had repeated itself at least 3 times that I knew of. Each time Megan would be devastated, and each time she would eventually let him back in, when he reappeared with promises of change. "I think we need to have a family meeting," I said finally. "All of us, including Emma. This can't just be swept under the rug with polite pretending." My mother was silent for a moment. "You're right. But maybe give it a day or two, let things settle a bit." After I hung up, James pulled me into his arms. "Are you okay?" "No," I admitted. "But I will be. Eventually. Right now, I'm just worried about Emma." We had planned to leave for our honeymoon that afternoon, 2 weeks in Greece, that we'd been looking forward to for months. But given the circumstances, neither of us felt right about leaving. "We can postpone," James said, reading my thoughts. "The islands have been there for thousands of years. They'll wait for us." I nodded gratefully. "Just for a few days until things settle. I need to make sure Emma is okay. And I need some kind of resolution with Megan. I can't leave with this hanging over us." After calling the travel agent to rearrange our plans, we headed to my parents' house. The knot in my stomach tightened as we pulled into the driveway. This was not how I had imagined spending the day after my wedding. My father answered the door, his face lined with worry and fatigue. He hugged me tightly, then extended his hand to James with an apologetic expression. "James, I owe you an apology," he said gruffly. "I should have known better." James shook his hand firmly. "You were looking out for your daughters. I understand." We found my mother and Emma in the kitchen, making cookies, my mother's go-to activity for stressful situations. Emma ran to me for a hug as soon as she saw us. "I thought you'd be on your way to Greece," she said. "We postponed for a few days," I explained, smoothing her hair. "We wanted to make sure you were okay." Emma looked down. "Mom's really upset. She won't come out of her room or talk to anyone." My father's expression darkened. "She'll have to face us eventually. What she did was inexcusable." "Dad," I said carefully, "I'm furious with Megan too. But if she's pregnant and Derek has left her again, she's in a vulnerable state. That doesn't excuse what she did, but it might explain it. My mother wiped her hands on a dish towel. Should I go up and try again? Before anyone could answer, we heard footsteps on the stairs. A moment later, Megan appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking like a ghost of herself. Her face was puffy from crying, her hair uncombed, still wearing the same clothes from the wedding. The room fell silent. Emma froze beside me, clearly afraid of her mother's reaction to seeing us. Megan's eyes moved from face to face, finally settling on me. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Shouldn't you be on your honeymoon?" "We postponed," I said evenly. "We needed to make sure Emma was okay. And we need to talk about what happened yesterday." Megan's eyes flicked to her daughter, then back to me. "There's nothing to talk about, Mom," Emma said softly. "I told them the truth. About Derek." Megan flinched as if she'd been struck. "You had no right," she hissed. "That was private. You accused my husband of getting you pregnant in front of our entire wedding," I said, anger finally breaking through my composed exterior. "You lost the right to privacy when you decided to destroy my wedding day with a lie." Megan's face crumpled. "You don't understand. You never understand. Everything always works out perfectly for you, Rebecca. The perfect job, the perfect house, the perfect husband. And look at me, a single mother stuck in a dead-end job, getting dumped over and over by the same worthless man. And now pregnant again, alone again." Her pain was so raw, so real that despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy. But sympathy didn't erase what she had done. "So, you decided to ruin my happiness because you're unhappy?" I asked. "How is that fair, Megan? What did I ever do to deserve that?" "You were born lucky," Megan cried. "Everything comes easy to you. You have no idea what my life is like." My father stepped forward. "That's enough, Megan. Your life choices are not Rebecca's fault. What you did yesterday was cruel and selfish, and you owe both Rebecca and James an apology." Megan laughed bitterly. "An apology? Will that fix anything? Will that make up for the fact that Derek told me he never wanted to see me or this baby again? Will it pay my bills or help me raise another child alone? Will it make people forget what happened at the wedding?" "No," James said quietly. "It won't fix those things. But it would be a start." Megan looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Some of the hostility seemed to drain out of her. "I'm sorry," she said finally, her voice small. "I was desperate. Derek left, and I couldn't. I couldn't face doing this alone again. When I saw you two so happy, something just snapped inside me. I thought if I could create enough doubt, enough chaos." She trailed off as if realizing how terrible her plan sounded when said aloud. "You were going to try to pass off Derek's baby as James's?" my father asked incredulously. "Did you really think that would work?" Megan shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't know what I thought. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just wanted someone to hurt as much as I was hurting." Emma, who had been silent through this exchange, suddenly spoke. "Is that why you made me promise not to tell anyone about Derek? Because you were planning this?" Megan turned to her daughter, remorse clear on her face. "No, baby. I wasn't planning anything then. I was just embarrassed that I'd let him back into our lives again. I didn't want everyone judging me for making the same mistake." "But when did you decide to lie about Uncle James?" Emma persisted. Megan seemed to collapse in on herself. "The day before the wedding, Derek and I had a huge fight. He said he never wanted the baby, that he was only back in town temporarily and was leaving again. I was devastated, and then I had to put on a happy face and be maid of honor at Rebecca's perfect wedding. It was too much." "So you planned it?" I asked, trying to understand. "It wasn't just something that happened in the moment." Megan nodded miserably. "I called Jenna that night. I told her what I was going to do. She tried to talk me out of it, but I wouldn't listen. I don't know what I thought, that if I created enough doubt, James might feel obligated to help financially with the baby, that I could ruin your perfect life the way mine was ruined." "It sounds so stupid and cruel now." "It was stupid and cruel," my father said harshly. "Do you have any idea the damage you've done? Not just to Rebecca and James, but to this family, to Emma." Megan looked at her daughter, who was watching her with a mixture of hurt and disappointment that no mother ever wants to see on her child's face. "I'm sorry, Emma," she whispered. "I'm so sorry you got caught in the middle of this. I wasn't thinking about how it would affect you. Emma's small voice cut through the tension in the room. I just don't understand why you would lie about something so important. You always tell me that honesty matters more than anything. The simple wisdom of a child, it hit Megan harder than any adult recrimination could have. She sank into a chair at the kitchen table, her face in her hands. I don't have an excuse, she said through her fingers. I was hurt and scared and jealous, and I lashed out in the worst possible way. I'll never be able to make up for what I did. The room fell silent. Despite everything, seeing my sister so broken brought me no satisfaction. Her actions had been inexcusable, but her pain was real. James, who had remained mostly quiet through this confrontation, finally spoke. Megan, what you did was deeply hurtful. To Rebecca, to me, to everyone who cares about us. But what matters now is what happens next. Are you really pregnant? Megan nodded, not meeting his eyes. And Derek is definitely the father. Yes, she whispered. It happened about 10 weeks ago when he first came back. Before he changed his mind about staying. James looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. I knew what he was asking, and despite my anger, I found myself nodding slightly. Then you need support, he said simply. Not just emotional, but practical. Medical care planning for the baby. If you'll let us, Rebecca and I want to help. Megan's head snapped up, disbelief written across her tear-stained face. Why would you help me after what I did to you? Because your family, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. And because that baby is my niece or nephew. And because Emma deserves to see adults handling difficult situations with grace and forgiveness, not revenge and bitterness. Fresh tears welled in Megan's eyes, but these seemed different from the angry, self-pitying tears of before. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not yet, my father said, his tone softening slightly. But you can earn it. By taking responsibility, by making amends, by getting help for whatever drove you to do something so hurtful. My mother, who had been quietly listening, finally joined the conversation. The first step is a genuine apology. Not an explanation or excuse, but a real apology. Megan looked from face to face, then took a deep breath. I am truly deeply sorry, she said, her voice shaking but sincere. What I did was inexcusable. I lied about James in the most public, hurtful way possible. I tried to destroy your wedding day out of jealousy and desperation. I betrayed my daughter's trust by making her complicit in my lies. I embarrassed our entire family. And I'm so sorry. It wasn't enough to erase the hurt. It couldn't undo the damage to my wedding day or the gossip that would inevitably follow. But it was a start, a foundation on which perhaps we could eventually rebuild trust. I accept your apology, I said carefully. But rebuilding our relationship will take time. And it will require changes, Megan. Real ones. My sister nodded, a fragile hope in her eyes. I understand. And I'll do whatever it takes. I promise. Emma, who had been watching this exchange with solemn attention, finally moved to her mother's side. I believe you, Mom, she said softly. And I love you. But I need you to be honest from now on. About everything. Megan pulled her daughter close, fresh tears falling. I will, baby. I promise I will. As I watched them embrace, I felt James's hand slip into mine, squeezing gently. We had weathered the storm of Megan's shocking accusation. We had maintained our trust in each other. And now perhaps we could help my sister find her way back from the darkness that had driven her to such a desperate act. It wasn't the day after wedding I had imagined. But in its own way, it was laying the groundwork for something important, a marriage that could withstand crisis, a family that could confront painful truths, and perhaps eventually a path to healing for my troubled sister. The next day, we gathered at my parents' house again, this time with a plan. My mother had arranged for a family therapist to join us, someone who could help facilitate a more structured conversation about what had happened and what needed to happen next. Dr. Winters, a calm, no-nonsense woman in her 50s, listened as we recounted the events of the wedding day and the confrontation that followed. Megan sat hunched in her chair, looking simultaneously defensive and ashamed as the story unfolded. I think we need to dig a bit deeper here, Dr. Winters said after we'd finished. Megan, this wasn't an impulsive act. You planned it. I'd like to understand what was happening for you emotionally that made this seem like a solution. Megan fidgeted with the sleeve of her sweater. I already explained. Derek left me pregnant and alone again. I was desperate. Desperation alone doesn't usually lead someone to publicly accuse their sister's new husband of infidelity. Dr. Winters pressed gently. There's something more here, isn't there? For a long moment, Megan was silent. Then, like a dam breaking, words began pouring out of her. Do you know what it's like to always be the failure? She asked, her voice cracking. To watch your perfect little sister sail through life, getting everything you ever wanted. Rebecca was always the smart one, the successful one, the one everyone admired. I was just the screw-up. The one who got pregnant at 20 and got stuck in a small town while she went off to college and built her amazing career. I started to protest, but Dr. Winters held up a hand, encouraging me to let Megan continue. Every time Rebecca achieved something, it just highlighted what a mess I'd made of my life, Megan went on. College, graduation, promotion, buying her first home. Meanwhile, I was struggling to pay rent, working a job. I hate raising Emma alone. And then she met James, this amazing, kind, successful man who clearly adored her, while I kept getting sucked back into the same toxic relationship with Derek over and over again. Tears were streaming down her face now. When Derek came back this time, I really thought things would be different. He seemed so changed, so committed. We were careful, but accidents happen. When I told him about the pregnancy, he was excited at first. We talked about getting a place together, being a real family with Emma. For a few weeks, I let myself believe that maybe finally I was going to have my happy ending too. My heart ached for my sister despite everything. I knew how much she had wanted a stable family for Emma, how many times Derek had promised exactly that before disappearing again. But then he started pulling away, Megan continued, making excuses for why he couldn't come over, why he needed more time before moving in together. And finally, the night before the wedding, he told me he'd taken a job in Seattle, that he wasn't ready to be a father again, that he thought I should consider my options with the pregnancy. He said he'd send money, but he couldn't stay. She looked up at me, raw pain in her eyes. And the next day, I had to put on a bridesmaid's dress and watch you marry the perfect man who would never abandon you, who was so excited to start a family with you someday. It broke something inside me, Rebecca. I was drowning, and it felt like you were standing on the shore, not even noticing I was going under. The room was silent when she finished speaking. I was stunned by the depth of resentment and pain my sister had been carrying, feelings I had sensed but never fully understood. Megan, I said carefully, I had no idea you felt that way. About me? About my life? She laughed bitterly. Of course you didn't. That's part of what makes it so frustrating. You don't even realize how charmed your life is, how everything just works out for you. Dr. Winters interjected gently. It sounds like there's been a long-standing pattern of comparison and competition between you two, with Megan feeling like she always comes up short. But that's not true, I protested. Megan, you have so many gifts that I don't. You're so much better with people than I am. Everyone has always been drawn to you. You're creative and intuitive in ways I could never be. And you're an amazing mother to Emma. Megan shook her head dismissively. Great, so I'm good at making small talk and arts and crafts. Meanwhile, you have the career, the house, the husband, financial security, the things that actually matter in the real world. Those things aren't what make someone valuable, Megan, my father said quietly. We've never measured either of you by your achievements or possessions. Maybe not consciously, Megan replied. But I saw how proud you were when Rebecca got into that fancy college when she got her big promotion. How you bragged about her to everyone while you just tolerated my choices. My parents looked stricken. We've always been proud of both of you, my mother insisted. In different ways, perhaps, but equally. That's not how it felt, Megan said. It felt like Rebecca was the daughter you bragged about and I was the one you worried about. And eventually I just internalized that. I became the person who makes bad choices, who fails, who needs rescuing. It became my identity. Dr. Winters nodded thoughtfully. And when you saw Rebecca getting the ultimate validation, a beautiful wedding to a man who clearly adored her, it triggered all those feelings of inadequacy and comparison. Yes, Megan admitted quietly. And when Derek left again, it was like confirmation of everything I believed about myself, that I didn't deserve happiness, that I wasn't worthy of being chosen and cherished the way Rebecca was. And something just snapped. She turned to James, who had been listening silently. I don't expect you to forgive me. What I did was unforgivable. But I need you to know, it wasn't really about you. You were just a symbol of everything I thought I could never have. James considered this. I understand feeling desperate, Megan. But what you did hurt more than just me. It hurt Rebecca on what should have been the happiest day of her life. It hurt your daughter who had to choose between loyalty to her mother and telling the truth. It hurt your parents who were torn between their children in a terrible moment. Megan nodded, fresh tears spilling. I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. I don't know how. You can start by getting help, my father said firmly. Real help, Megan. This pattern with Derek, these feelings of inadequacy, this destructive jealousy, you need to address it all. For your sake, for Emma's sake, and for the baby's sake. Your father's right, Dr. Winters agreed. What you're describing goes beyond situational desperation. There are deeper issues here that need professional support. I don't have the money for therapy, Megan said automatically. We'll help with that, my mother said, surprising me. We should have offered long ago, honestly. We knew you were struggling, but we didn't want to overstep. I looked at James, finding confirmation in his eyes. We'll help too, I said. With therapy costs, with practical support during the pregnancy. Whatever you need, Megan. She stared at me in disbelief. Why would you do that? After what I did? Because that's what family does, I said simply. We hurt each other sometimes terribly. We make mistakes. But we don't give up on each other. Emma, who had been sitting quietly beside my mother, spoke up. Does this mean we're going to be okay? All of us? Her question, so innocent and hopeful, cut through the tension in the room. My father cleared his throat, clearly emotional. Yes, Emma, he said firmly. We're all going to be okay. It might take some time and some hard work, but we'll get there. Dr. Winters suggested we end the session there on that note of cautious hope. As everyone began to move, I pulled Megan aside. I need to know something, I said quietly. Were you ever going to tell me the truth? If Emma hadn't spoken up, Megan couldn't meet my eyes. I don't know, she admitted. I think I was so caught up in my own pain that I wasn't thinking clearly about the consequences. Once I said it, I felt trapped in the lie. But seeing the look on your face, on Emma's face, I think eventually I would have broken down and confessed. But I can't promise that. Her honesty, though painful, was somehow reassuring. At least now we were dealing with truth, not more manipulation. I want to rebuild our relationship, Megan. But it has to be built on something real this time. No more pretending, no more competition, no more secrets. I want that too, she whispered. I'm just not sure I know how to do it. That's what the therapy is for, I said, squeezing her hand briefly. And we'll figure it out together. As James and I prepared to leave, Emma came running up to us, throwing her arms around my waist. Thank you for not hating my mom, she said, her voice muffled against my sweater. I hugged her back tightly. I could never hate your mom, Emma. I'm angry and hurt right now, but underneath all that I love her. She's my sister. Emma looked up at me, her young face serious. Is it okay if I come visit you sometimes? Just me. Of course, I said immediately. Our door is always open to you. As we finally drove away, heading back to our home to salvage what we could of our postponed honeymoon plans, I felt emotionally drained but oddly hopeful. The wedding day drama had been terrible, but perhaps it had lanced a festering wound in our family that had needed attention for years. Are you okay? James asked, reaching for my hand. I think I will be, I said honestly. It's a lot to process, but I feel like we're moving in the right direction now. Like we're finally dealing with the real issues instead of just the symptoms. He nodded his thumb tracing circles on my palm. Your sister has a long road ahead of her. We all do, I said. But at least now we're walking it with our eyes open. That night, as I lay beside James in our bed, I thought about how differently things might have turned out if Emma hadn't found the courage to tell the truth. How a lie might have poisoned our family forever. Instead, painful as it was, we had a chance at real healing, not just covering over the cracks, but rebuilding something stronger. It wasn't the wedding aftermath I had dreamed of, but perhaps it was the one our family needed. 6 months passed. Our postponed honeymoon to Greece, eventually taken 3 weeks after the wedding, felt like a distant dream compared to the reality we returned to. The fallout from Megan's wedding day announcement continued to ripple through our lives, though the waves had gradually diminished in intensity. True to her word, Megan had committed to therapy, both individual sessions and family counseling with all of us. The first few months were rocky. There were sessions where she shut down completely, others where she lashed out in defensive anger, and still others where she broke down in tears of genuine remorse. But slowly, steadily changes began to emerge. Emma spent weekends with us regularly, a routine that had developed naturally as Megan worked through her issues. At first, I worried that Emma might feel caught between us, but she seemed to blossom with the additional stability and attention. James took to his role as honorary uncle with surprising enthusiasm, helping Emma with her science projects and teaching her to make his famous pancakes on Sunday mornings. "It's helping me too," he admitted one night after Emma had gone to bed, "processing everything that happened. Seeing how resilient she is makes me believe we can all get through this." My relationship with Megan remained complicated. The trust that had been broken couldn't be repaired overnight, and there were moments when the hurt and anger would resurface unexpectedly. But there were also moments of connection that felt more authentic than anything we'd shared in years. "I never realized how much energy I was putting into competing with you," she told me during one of our court-mandated sister lunch dates. "It was exhausting, constantly measuring myself against you and coming up short. I'm trying to learn how to just be me now, not the anti-Rebecca." Her pregnancy progressed the baby boy, growing steadily, according to her doctor. Derek remained in Seattle, sending occasional child support checks but otherwise uninvolved. Initially, Megan had held out hope that he might change his mind, but as weeks turned to months with minimal contact, she had begun to accept the reality of raising another child alone, though this time with more family support. Before, my parents had stepped up in ways that surprised me. My father, traditionally hands-off with women's issues, had accompanied Megan to doctor's appointments when I couldn't make it. My mother had started a college fund for the baby equal to the one they'd established for Emma years ago. Small gestures, perhaps, but significant in showing Megan that this child would be welcomed and valued. James and I had decided to delay our own family plans for a year, focusing instead on supporting Megan and Emma through this transition. It wasn't a decision we made lightly, but it felt right a way of putting family healing before our personal timeline. "The baby will only be a few months old when we start trying," James reasoned. "Our kids will be close enough in age to be friends." The casual way he included Megan's unborn son in his vision of our family's future brought tears to my eyes. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, the bonds between us were strengthening in new ways. At 7 months pregnant, Megan called me in tears one evening. I immediately feared something was wrong with the baby, but her distress was emotional rather than physical. "I found my old journals from high school," she explained, her voice thick. "Reading them was like meeting a stranger, this angry, jealous girl who spent all her energy resenting you instead of figuring out who she wanted to be. It's like I've wasted years of my life on this competition that only existed in my head." "It wasn't only in your head," I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty. "I felt it too. I just responded differently, trying to be perfect to never give anyone reason to compare us unfavorably. It was my own kind of prison." That conversation marked a turning point between us. For the first time, we were acknowledging the dynamic that had shaped our relationship for decades, both taking responsibility for our parts in it. It didn't erase the hurt of the wedding day drama, but it contextualized it within a longer, more complex story of sibling rivalry gone toxic. As Megan's due date approached, she asked hesitantly if James and I would be in the delivery room with her. "You don't have to," she assured us quickly. "I know it's a lot to ask, especially from you, James. But I don't want to do this alone again." James didn't hesitate. "Of course we'll be there. That's what family does." His generosity of spirit continued to amaze me. When I asked him about it privately, wondering if he was truly comfortable with the arrangement given their history, he smiled ruefully. "I won't pretend it isn't complicated," he admitted. "But holding a grudge would only hurt all of us in the long run. And that baby is innocent in all this. He deserves to be welcomed with love, not clouded by lingering resentments." The day Megan went into labor was chaotic but strangely beautiful. Emma stayed with my parents while James and I accompanied Megan to the hospital. For 14 hours, we took turns supporting her, holding her hand through contractions, feeding her ice chips, advocating with hospital staff when needed. When her son finally arrived, 7 pounds 8 ounces with a shock of dark hair, the three of us cried together, tears of joy and exhaustion and release. "Meet your nephew," Megan said softly, placing the swaddled infant in my arms. "Noah James Walsh." I looked up sharply at the middle name. "James." Megan nodded, glancing at my husband with tentative hope in her eyes. If that's okay, I wanted. I wanted him to be named after someone who knows how to forgive. Someone who understands what family really means. James, who had maintained his composure through the entire labor and delivery, finally broke down at this. He turned away briefly, shoulders shaking with silent tears. When he turned back, his eyes were red, but his smile was genuine. "I'm honored," he said simply. "And I promise to live up to the name." Noah James became our family's healing point. The innocent new life brought us together in ways we couldn't have imagined. My parents doted on their new grandson, showering him with the same love they had always given Emma. For her part, Emma took to being a big sister with natural ease, proudly helping with bottles and diaper changes. One year after the wedding day disaster, we gathered at my parents' house to celebrate Noah's first birthday. The contrast to that painful confrontation couldn't have been more stark. Megan, now steady in her recovery and working part-time while taking online classes, had organized a simple celebration with homemade cake and thoughtful decorations. As I watched her interact with James, easy, respectful, with no trace of the old tension, I marveled at how far we'd come. She caught me looking and crossed the room to sit beside me while the others played with Noah. "Penny, for your thoughts," she asked. "Just thinking about how much has changed in a year," I replied honestly. Megan nodded, a shadow crossing her face. "I still can't believe what I did that day. Sometimes I wake up feeling so ashamed I can hardly breathe." "Your therapist would probably say that shame isn't productive," I reminded her gently. "I know. And she'd be right." Megan sighed. "But I think a little residual guilt is appropriate, don't you? It keeps me honest." I considered this. "Maybe. As long as it doesn't define you. You're not just the sum of your worst decisions, Meg." "That's something I'm still learning to believe," she admitted. "But having you and James in my life, seeing how you've forgiven me when you had every right to cut me off completely, it's teaching me something important about the kind of person I want to be." James joined us, Noah balanced on his hip. My heart swelled at the sight of them together, this man who had shown such extraordinary grace, holding the child who bore his name. "Birthday boy wants his Auntie," James said, transferring Noah to my arms. The baby immediately grabbed a fistful of my hair, gurgling happily. "He's got your stubbornness," I told Megan, carefully disentangling his tiny fingers. "And your determination," she countered with a smile. That evening, after the cake was eaten and the presents opened, I found myself alone with Emma in the kitchen. Now 13, she was growing into a thoughtful, sensitive young woman. "You know what I realized," she said as we loaded the dishwasher. "A year ago, I was so scared that our family was broken forever. I thought Mom had ruined everything. But look at us now. You played a big part in that healing, Emma," I told her. "Your courage that day made all the difference." She shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "I just told the truth. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do," I said. "Especially when it means standing up to someone you love." Emma considered this. "Mom's different now. Better. She doesn't get so angry or sad all the time. And she talks to me about real stuff instead of treating me like a little kid." Therapy has helped her a lot, I agreed. But so has having honest relationships with the people who love her. "Including you. Especially me," I acknowledged. "We had a lot of old patterns to break. We're still working on it, but it's better than it's ever been." Later that night, as James and I drove home, I reflected on the journey of the past year. Do you ever think about how different things might have been if Megan hadn't done what she did at our wedding? James considered the question carefully. "Honestly, as painful as it was, I think it needed to happen. Not the way it did, obviously, but something had to break the cycle you two were in. Sometimes the worst moments create the space for real change." "That's a very philosophical take on having your wedding day ruined," I observed, with a small smile. He laughed, squeezing my hand. "Hey, it all worked out in the end. We're married. We have an amazing relationship with Emma and Noah. And your sister is becoming someone who can actually be happy for others without feeling diminished herself. That's pretty remarkable." "It is," I agreed. "Though I still might have preferred a drama-free wedding." "Where's the story in that?" James teased. "Now we have something to tell our kids someday." The mention of kids reminded me of our plans. After putting our family expansion on hold to support Megan through her pregnancy and Noah's early months, we were now trying for a baby of our own. The timing felt right. Noah was walking now, Megan was stable, and we were ready to begin the next chapter of our lives. Our wedding day had been marred by an act born of desperation and jealousy, but the marriage that followed had been strengthened by adversity. We had learned early how to stand together in a crisis, how to discern truth from manipulation, how to forgive without forgetting. These weren't lessons I would have chosen, but they had served us well. As we pulled into our driveway, I thought about how life rarely follows the neat narratives we imagine for ourselves. My perfect wedding day had been shattered, but from those broken pieces, we had built something stronger and more authentic than I could have imagined. Not just a marriage, but a healed family system, with room for growth and forgiveness. "What are you thinking about?" James asked as we walked to the door. "Just that sometimes the happy ending doesn't look anything like what you expected," I replied. "But that doesn't make it any less happy." He pulled me close, kissing the top of my head. "I'd say we got pretty lucky, all things considered." Looking back at the turbulent year behind us and forward to the hopeful future ahead, I couldn't help but agree. Not everyone could transform a wedding day disaster into a foundation for genuine healing, but somehow, against all odds, that's exactly what we had done. If you've ever experienced family drama that seemed impossible to overcome, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. How did you find your way to forgiveness? Remember to like this video if you found our journey meaningful, and subscribe for more real-life stories about family forgiveness and finding your way through life's unexpected challenges. Thank you for joining me in this vulnerable sharing, and I wish you strength and healing in your own relationships.